Hello, welcome once more. In this particular training, we'll be looking at the practical aspect of the whole thing that we discussed in the previous lecture. So in this particular lecture, let's look at how do we start writing this HTML. Now, to start writing this HTML, we need a text editor or IDE. Don't get confused. Text editor and IDE are quite different things, although they may look similar. Text editor is just a software that enables you to type your text files. So you can use anything at all, your notepad that is pre-installed on your Windows, whatever. But the IDE is just integrated development terminal or development environment where you can actually perform some coding instructions. So we'll still look at that later. So the first thing we do is I would recommend you go with Visual Studio Code. So go to your browser and you type Visual Studio Code or VS Code and select code.visualstudios.com, and this is the first link you see there is their official website, and it's free. It's a free integrated development environment. It contains a text editor as well as the IDE, so you don't have to bother yourself on getting an IDE and a text editor. Both of them are integrated in Visual Studio Code. Sorry. Okay, now so click on download. To download it, I already have it, so I'm not going to be downloading this thing, so I'm going to cancel this cancel because I have it already. So for you, you have to install it in your system. You can actually use your mobile devices here. Go to, if you are using an Android device, you can go to Google Play Store and you search for A code, or you can search for text editor. And you see any text editor there is quite good for you. So after downloading and installing this Visual Studio Code, the next thing I will need to do is to um, go to my device, and I'm going to open a folder just here, right click and uh, select new and select folder and type the name of the folder. For me, I'm going to say training 2 because I have a training there already. Okay, so the next thing is to open my Visual Studio Code. Now when I do that, I'm going to minimize it and I'm going to drag this to Visual Studio Code environment and drop it there. So once I do this, this folder will be uh, dropped here. You can see we are having problem loading the file. Is actually loading the file since then. Another way I can bring this is to go to file and go to open folder. Then you look for the folder on desktop, select this folder and select it. So these are the ways through which you can bring in your folders. So I have my folder opened. So this arrow down is showing that my folder is actually opened. If I click it this way, it means my folder is not opened. So anything I add in this here is not going to be saved within this folder. So I'm going to open it. So to create a file, I have to click on this. And the first page of every website is known as index.html. You can actually save with any name of your choice, but I prefer you save it with index.html. So index.html. Now, what the HTML instruct the computer, telling it that this is actually a website. So it is an extension, just like having your pictures in JPG, in PNG, in SVG, in GIF. All these things are image extensions that describes how the computer understands and renders such image. So the same way in this, we have to indicate that this is a .html file so that the computer can understand that this is actually a website. So click enter and we have it here. Now, the next thing you have to do for you to be able to follow up with this particular training and make your work easier for you is to install an extension on this Visual Studio Code that is called Metri Emmet. So how do you install the extension? You go to the extensions, click on extension, and you search for Emmet, E-M-M-E-T. So it's going to display Metro Emmet. You click on it and install it. For me, I have it already, so I don't have to install it again. Another thing, another extension that we'll be needing is the live server. So you search live server and you as well install it. So I have it already, so no need of installing it again. So once you are done with this installation of the extensions, the next thing is to start writing your HTML. Basically, normally, if I want to start writing my HTML, I can just simply type HTML and I select HTML5 and it renders, it types all the necessary structure for me. If I don't want to use this method, there's another method I can actually use. I can easily type exclamation and hit enter. It's the same thing. It generates demo content, the structural content of this HTML. So this is what actually the reason why we installed Metro Emmet. So the Metro Emmet is what generates all these things. So I'll go ahead to tell you what each of these lines actually indicates. So like we said in the previous lesson, that this doc type HTML instruct the computer that this is actually HTML5. And if you can remember, the first method we used, we typed HTML and we selected HTML5 and it generated this structure. So this is actually HTML5. So there are so many versions of HTML, but the most common now, which is the most recent, is HTML5, and it is compatible in most of the recent browsers. Okay, so now the HTML, um, the next line is the HTML, which indicates that the language of this HTML is English. So the HTML ends here. So where within the HTML, we now have the head and the body. So the head contains the metas, tags, the title, and every other thing. Just like I said in the previous lesson, that the head section controls how the HTML will be rendered, the instruction on how the HTML will be rendered. Now the body section is where most of the things you type on this thing is going to display on the website. So whatever you see on the website is actually on the body. Now this title is the title of the page you are accessing on the website. So let's call it the home page. So let's just type a random something here. And then let's save this, Control S. And now come down here and click on Go Live. And you can see within here, we have this thing we typed here is here, and our title is homepage, which is the title we have here. Let me bring this then down, and so okay, so this is not on Chrome. This is on the Microsoft browser. So you can see what actually happened here is that we have the whole this text here, but we cannot do anything to this text. We cannot instruct this computer on what next to do to this. So let me just divide this screen between my text editor and my browser so that I don't have to go every time to refresh um, the browser. Okay, so we cannot pass any other instruction to this. So that's why we cannot just type in random words here. So we use the HTML tag. So let's introduce the heading tag, the H1, the heading tag. Now the heading tag helps in introducing the title of something, title of a page, of a sub-page, of an image, the particular article, whatever. There is this level of sequence in the H tag. So we have the H1, the biggest heading, and the H6, which is the smallest heading. So we're going to look into it so that we see how this is rendered. So let's say this is a heading. Let's save this, and you see we have this is a heading, and it is very bold to indicate that this is actually a heading tag. Let's see the difference between the H2. I can simply type H2 and hit enter. This is one of the functions of the emmet. So I can also say this is a second heading and save it. So you can see that here this one is actually smaller than this. So this is the biggest heading. So let's test the H6, H6, and this this is the smallest heading. Save it. So we have this is the smallest heading, and this is very small. So this is the heading tags. The next tag, remember that the heading tag runs from H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. So the next tag we are going to be looking at is the paragraph tag. So let's look at the paragraph tag. So let's type P, paragraph tag is P. So we can just generate a random text here. So I can say lorem 20 to generate random text. So this is actually a random text, the paragraph. So this is how if I want to bring in a paragraph into my website, this is how I would do it. I'll use p tag. Now, the essence of using tag is that it makes it easier for you to reference it in your JavaScript and in your CSS. Take for instance, if I come to this HTML and I want to style it, I can say style is equal to, and let's tell it to give me a color. Let's tell it to give me a color of red. And you can see that if I save it, this becomes red. But if I just have something attached without any tag, it will be very difficult for me to start. Just like, let's have this random text, and if it appears there, I cannot add style to it. You can see I cannot add any style to it. It doesn't even understand how to pass the styling uh, reference to that. So it is quite understandable that you should always apply the tag, the tag method, for you to be able to access it and reference it on your CSS and your JavaScript. Another tag we should be looking at, let's look at comments. It's very important that while writing your code, you apply comments. Now, what is a comment? A comment is an instruction on how you pass your whatever you write. You can just write instruction on what you description of your code, or what how you arrived at a particular code. Now, while writing this a website, you can have up to 10,000 lines of code. And if you don't have a documentation of how or what you did in a particular thing, in a particular session, it becomes very difficult to read such code. So you have to apply comment. And how do you apply comment? So let's apply comment maybe at the top. The browser does not read it, but the browser reads it and understands that it's a comment and doesn't render it to the user. So let's apply a comment. And to apply a comment, I can just simply open this up and have my exclamation and double this thing. So whatever I write here, maybe this is how to write a heading in HTML. So if I save this, it doesn't get rendered on the browser. Now, but let me show you something. I can go to the development tool in this browser. And how do I access the development tool? I can just right click on my browser and go to inspect. On the inspect, you can see I have my HTML. And if I open this thing up, you can see this comment. And it's not rendered on the browser display, but it is found within the code. So because the browser reads it and notice that you don't want to display this to your users. So, but it actually understands it. So you'll be using this development tool a lot, but we are not going to be looking at it now. So I'm going to introduce it in the JavaScript section of this training. So let's close it up and minimize this again. All right. So if I wrap this thing in, if I wrap all of them in this, they are going to become comments. And you can see my browser is now empty, but this code is still available. So you can still do this. All right. The next thing is, if you want to introduce a link to your web page. Now, let's say we are writing a menu and we want, when the person clicks on a particular menu item, it takes them to a link. Let's say you have pages of your website, and you have home, about, contact us, and so many other listings. And you want, when somebody clicks on maybe about us, it takes them to the about us page. So how do we do that? We use linking. And how do we link? We use the A tag. So I can write A and hit enter. Now I have href. The href is, where do you want to send the person once they click on that link. So I can say I want to send them to google.com. And what do you want them to see? What do you want them to see and click before it takes them to this particular link? So I can see, I can say, click me to go to Google. You can save this. You can see, click me to go to Google, and if I click this, it's going to send me to google.com. Now, I will explain the get method and the post method later, so so that you don't get confused. See, you cannot get google.com. This is actually because I am passing this as an instruction to the uh, uh, um, address, which is a get method. I'll still explain it in a later class. All right, the next thing we'll be looking at is how to introduce a list. There are two types of list items. There are the ordered list and the unordered list. Now, the ordered list we use OL, and within it we mention the list items. So let's say girls li again. So the list items are going to be within the li. I have already instructed this that this is going to be ordered. So this boys li, men, and this is saved with 1, 2, and 3. So you can see in my list items, I did not have numbering, but in this, in the browser, it is rendered as 1, 2, 3 because it is an ordered list. Ordered list. So for me to get on ordered list, I'm going to start it with UL, and within the UL, I'm going to wrap it with the list words. So let's use the same words: girls, list item again, boys, list item again, men. Now, if you look at this one, you see it comes with a dot. Comes with a dot in the list. This is actually because this one is unordered list, while this one is ordered list. So this is how I can bring in list items or list my items in HTML. Let's talk about the image tag. Now, how do I bring out an image into the website? This is very key to designing your website, because most times without images and icons in the website, it gets the, the website gets boring. So let's bring image. We use the img tag. So now within the source, this is image. Where do I want to get this image from? I can copy the link of an image and paste it here. I can also actually go to this my folder, and I'll create another folder called img, or maybe image. You can name it anything you like, literally anything you like. So I have the image folder, and if I actually go to my file manager here, I can go to my pictures, and I can just select any picture of my choice. Maybe I can copy. this picture, then I bring it into that my folder, which is training 2, and I save it under the image folder. So I paste it under the image folder. I can actually rename. Okay, you can see watch the format. This image is actually, let's right click on the image and look for the image properties. So this image is of the type of file or extension called JPG. So it's very important to notice the image type. Now, if I come to this Visual Studio Code again, you see that this image is on my, I can actually see this image. You can see. All right, let's bring it to the browser. So the source of my image is in the folder that is called img. Then I'm going to have a forward slash and the name of the image dot the extension of the image. Remember, the image is of the JPG extension. So this becomes website, which is the name of the image, dot the JPG, which is the extension of the image. And if you look at here, this is the image, and it's very bold, very big, in the sense that it covers the whole part of the browser. It is not fluid, it cannot, you see, it gives a very bad user experience. So what we should do is to make sure that our image is within the space of the browser. So how do we do that? Now, before then, let me tell you something. If I didn't get the correct spelling to this image, let's remove E, for example. You can see that I can't find that image again, and this is actually because I made mistake in the spelling. So this alternative alt is where I can add an alternative text to tell the browser, if you don't find this image in my root folder, you can actually use this word to replace it. So I can say logo, for example, here, and once I type that, you can see this comes out to show that I didn't find this image, but look at this word I find. I find this word logo. So, but if I put up the correct spelling now, this image will appear. Now, to put up this image, to make it to be responsive in the sense that it has to accommodate the size of the screen of whatever device that is accessing it. So in this case, we are going to set the width of this image as 100%. Now, once we set it to 100%, you can see that it becomes the size of the screen. And if I increase this thing, this browser size, it is increasing with the browser size. So this is actually how to make your image responsive. All right. So we are progressing actually. We are actually progressing. Now let's look at more details about this. Let's look at a table. Let's say I want to present the difference between two things. So, I have to need a table, then I have this side, I have this side. Maybe the difference between boys and girls. So I have boys here, I have girls here. So it's done with a table. So let's have a table. So to have a table, we use table tag. So within the table, we should have a table head and a table row. So let's have a table head. So we should have boys and girls. So we say table head is TH. So boys and the table head again, gears. So this sometimes is confusing because uh, you may not know where this thing will render, but you have to understand that the table head applies within the horizontal axis. So the number of table heads you have is going to be rendered in the horizontal axis. The next thing is the table rows, which is the TR. And within the table rows, you now have the table data. What data that will be found in the row? So we have TD, which is table data. And within it, I can say boys have beers. So if you scroll up, you can see this is found on the boys axis. Another one is to have another table data here. So let's have TD again and say girls don't have. So you can see that what I have here is actually, let's look at it in details. You have a TR, which indicates the table row, which is the horizontal axis of a table, or yes, the row, the horizontal axis. So if you have the first row, the second row will come to the bottom. The same thing. Now, the data will be included in the table row. So since you have two table head, the table data has to be two. So that is it. If you have three table heads, then the table data will have to be three. If you have four table heads, then table data has to be four. So this is what it is. So let's add another table row so that you understand what we actually say. So we have table data. So we say boys. So this is going to come below the boys table. Boys run faster. And let's have another table data. I'll say girls are very fast. And if I save this, so you can see this is also found on this. Now somebody will ask, why is it that we don't have lines drawn along the table? So that is where the CSS comes in. With the CSS, we can add a border to the table to describe that we want to have a border in the table. So let's just do some magic here. So let's say style and let's say border. And this is border. And we can set it to 2 pixels. 2 pixels solid. So you can see that we now have line drawn on the table. You can actually apply this same concept in everything. So, but this is the table and how to get your table. The next uh, tag we should be looking at is the form. So if you want to collect information from the user, want them to register, want them to subscribe for a newsletter, want to just to collect information from the user. How do we do that? So we apply the form concept, and in this case we have to use form tag. So to use the form, just type form. So since you are using Emmet, so we don't need the form action for now. So but the form action is the get method, but we don't actually need it now. So we'll still be explaining it later on. So to collect text, text data from the user, we can just, in fact, to collect text, we can use what we call the input tag. So I can just say input. So, and the type of the input as text. And I can describe the name as maybe name. And if you scroll down here, you see we have a place to write something, but there is no name on it. So this is where the label comes in. So you can say label, so label for, you can say name, and within this label we say name. And you see we can now type. Now you notice something, this table and this form, the distance to differentiate them is not that much. So what I will do is between the table and the form, I'll add BR, which is a line break. Once I do that, I have a space here. I have a space here. So that is how to give a space. I can actually even add horizontal line to this. So to do that, I can just type HR and I'll have a horizontal line. You can see the line here. So let's continue with our form. So what if I want to receive a number? I don't want the user to add other alphabets. I only want to collect a number. So in this case, let's bring our label for. So let's say phone number. And here, this is where it displays the item phone number. And so here we say input, and the type of input here is going to be number, and we save it. And if we go down, so there is something here. We need to line break this BR so that we have it there. So you can see here it is only recognizing phone number, but if in here it can recognize anything, you can type anything you want. But here, if you are typing other things, it is not accepting the alphabets. But if I type numbers, it is accepting the numbers. You can actually have this, click here, you can see that this is a number. Let's do the same thing again for email. So I'm going to copy. So for email, let's also line break it. So here I am going to set it email. Then I have to set this as also email. Then on the type of data I want to collect, I will specify that this is email. Now if I save this and come up here, email. It is only going to respond to email. If I type any other thing, it will say, please include at. Because this is actually telling the browser how to render. But this is email. So that is for the email tags. So what if I want to collect a calendar, a date? I will apply the same principle. I just needed to copy the line break as well. So in here, I will say this is date. Then I will say date of birth. Then under this type, input type, I will say date. Then if you save it, come here, you see this is actually a calendar. And if I click on it, it brings up a calendar where I can actually select or even set up the year, the month. You can set up the year. You can scroll down. You can see. You can set up the year. It's 2021 May and the date. And you can see this is actually set up. So now there are so many other data types that you can pass through this place. You can go to W3 Schools to read up the documentation on all other HTML types. So how do you access the W3 Schools? So you can actually go to w3schools.com /HTML to access your those things. So you can see the paragraph, the style, the formatting, the quotation, link, favicons, table, block, inline, ID, iframe, JavaScript, compute code, semantics, forms, graphics, media. You can actually add video, uh, geolocations. If you want to add a location to your web page, um, and so many other things. So here you can get every other information that you need. But I'm still accessible in the comment section. So in the comment section, you can actually ask your question. If you are finding it difficult to understand, I will still make a video to explain them. So I'm actually doing this because of time, so that we don't spend much time in one single thing. All right, so let's minimize this and come back. Now, how do we submit this form? This is very serious thing, a very serious case. So to submit a form, there are two things. We have button, but there are two ways to bring in a button. We have a button tag, which you can use button type to bring in. But in this case, if you are receiving a form, so many people make this mistake. They use button tag. If you are receiving a form, you have to use the input type of button and not button. Look at what I mean. So some people will come here when they are done with the form and they want to receive the input of the user from the form. They can just type button and they will say submit. Now, this is very wrong. Even though if I click this, it refreshes, it is very wrong. Let's bring it down, BR, and it's very wrong. Don't do this. I'll tell you where to use this particular button. So for here, you use input, use input type button. So you set your input type as button and then set the value as submit. Now this you can see we have a button submit. You can see once I click on this, and because the form is still empty, it's not going to work for me. And that's because the form is still empty. And we will still reference this in our back end, because when we want to reference it in our back end, we tell the back end, the server, that if the value is set as submit, that it should post it or it should get it. So this is the essence of using this. Okay, so but you can actually have another form of button, which is the button tag with the button, the other one I showed you now. So at this point, I am going to end the introduction to HTML. The next class, we'll be talking about the advanced form of HTML, which is the application of classes and uh, ID to HTML. And we shall also be introducing the CSS in our next class. Thank you very much, and make sure you finish up this video. I know the video is very long, but it is for your own good. Uh, you can follow it up squarely to make sure you get everything that I just explained in this video. Thank you very much. I hope to see you in the next class. Make sure you don't miss your class.